Why was she the only one awake when the world seemed to hold its breath? The desert stretched black and silent in front of her, broken only by the faint shimmer of moonlight on barbed wire. She lay prone, cheek pressed to the stock of her rifle, eyes steady through the scope. Nothing moved. Not yet. But she felt it like a vibration in her bones. The enemy would come. And when they did, this quiet line she guarded would turn into fire. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger guard, not tense, not lax. Just ready, always ready. Behind her, the forward outpost looked like nothing. Just sandbags and shadows, with tired soldiers tucked into corners, their heads nodding against rifles. The kind of place history never remembers, but she would remember. Because if the line broke tonight, it would be remembered in blood. She shifted her shoulder slightly. The rifle creaked against her vest, too loud. She froze, waited. The silence swallowed it whole. Her breathing was steady, too steady. She hated that. It meant she was calm, and calm meant she was thinking too much. About why she, of all people, had been the one assigned to this lonely sector. About what the commander hadn't said during the briefing. About what she hadn't told anyone. Not yet. They thought she was here because she was the best shot in the unit. That was true. But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was something else, something she carried like a stone inside her chest. She adjusted her scope again. Her mouth was dry. The desert always took the water out of you even when you didn't notice. She reached for her canteen, then stopped. A flicker. Out there. A ripple against the sand so faint most people wouldn't have seen it. But she did. Her hand went back to the rifle, slow, controlled. Through the scope the desert magnified, empty ridges, low scrub, then movement, a figure crouched half-hidden, then another, and another. She counted 1, 2, 3, 4. And more shadows behind them. Her lips pressed together. They were early, too early. The outpost wasn't ready. Her squad wasn't ready. Half of them were asleep, the other half pretending not to be afraid. And here she was, the only thing standing between silence and chaos. She lowered her cheek, steady against the stock, exhaled slowly. She could drop the first one, maybe the second before the others scattered, but that would light the fuse, and once it started it wouldn't stop. She thought of the commander's words in the briefing, casual, dismissive. You'll hold the sector until reinforcements rotate. He hadn't looked at her when he said it. No one had. They'd all looked past her, as if the quiet girl at the table wasn't really there. But she was here now, and so were they. She aimed, finger curled, gentle, like squeezing a secret. But she didn't fire, not yet. Her heart thudded once, heavy. What if she waited? What if she let them come closer? She could buy her squad a few more minutes of ignorance, a few more breaths of borrowed peace. Or she could end it now, pull the trigger and drag them all into the storm. A choice, always a choice. She swallowed, throat tight. The first man lifted his hand, a signal. She saw the faint gleam of steel in the moonlight. Weapons. She pulled the trigger. The crack shattered the night. The first man fell. The desert swallowed him in silence. The others froze, ducked, scattered for cover. But too late. Her rifle spoke again, another crack, another body tumbling into the sand. Shouts rose, shadows scrambled. Her line was drawn. Behind her, the outpost stirred, groggy voices calling out, boots thudding against dirt. They would wake to fire and confusion. But she was already awake. She had been awake long before tonight. Another target moved through her scope. She squeezed, missed. A flash of panic jolted through her. She never missed. She steadied, corrected, fired again, hit. The shouting grew louder now. Her squad was awake, stumbling into positions, rifles shaking as they pointed toward the dark horizon. She heard one voice, Anders, the youngest of them, barely 20. He was swearing under his breath, voice cracking. They're coming, they're coming. Yes, they're coming, she whispered to herself. The desert erupted, muzzle flashes in the distance. Bullets cut the air, sharp, angry whispers passing close. She pressed herself lower, adjusted, fired again. The recoil punched her shoulder. Another shadow dropped. Her squad fired blindly, bursts of panic into the night. She clenched her jaw. They weren't steady. They weren't ready. They were scared kids with guns. But they had her. She kept firing, slow, precise. Each shot a decision, each shot a promise. Her scope blurred for a second. She blinked. Sweat, grit, exhaustion. Her eyes burned. She pushed it down. A memory came, uninvited. The first time she'd ever held a rifle. Not here, not in uniform. Back home on a stretch of farmland where the horizon looked endless. Her father's voice guiding her. Breathe with it, don't fight it. A rifle doesn't forgive panic. She hadn't thought of him in years, not since. She fired again. Another shadow fell. She bit back the rest of the memory. This wasn't the time, not yet. The desert lit up now, enemy tracers streaking across the night like burning comets. Her squad ducked, cursed, shouted. Someone screamed. She couldn't tell who. Her finger stayed steady. Her breathing stayed calm. Calm meant thinking too much. She thought, what if they overran them? What if this little outpost became a graveyard? Would anyone even know? Would anyone even care? She thought of the map in the commander's hand. The way his finger had brushed over their sector like it was just another mark, another square of dirt. Disposable, forgettable. She fired again. Not forgettable, not tonight. Another scream behind her. She risked a glance. Anders was down, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. His eyes were wide, wild. She met them for just a second. "I've got you," she mouthed. He couldn't hear her, but maybe he believed it anyway. She turned back. A shadow rose, running low across the sand, closing the distance. She fired. The body crumpled mid-stride. Her squad was holding now, barely. The initial panic had hardened into something else, raw survival. They shouted to each other, covering sectors, reloading, cursing. Not trained soldiers, just humans clinging to life. And she was the anchor. Her shoulder ached, her eyes burned. Her throat was raw from breathing dust and smoke, but her hands didn't shake, they never shook. A burst of fire cut close, spraying sand against her cheek. She flinched, instinctive. The world tilted for a heartbeat. She forced herself back down, pressed her cheek to the stock. Her heart thudded again, heavy, hard. She thought, why me? Why always me? The stone in her chest pressed heavier. The secret reason she was here. The thing she hadn't told them. Another figure rose in her scope. She fired, missed again, cursed under her breath, adjusted, fired, hit. Her squad cheered weakly at each body that fell, as if they couldn't believe it was working, as if the line might actually hold. But she didn't cheer, she just kept firing, because she knew something they didn't, something she hadn't said. The enemy wasn't just testing them tonight. This was only the beginning. The real storm hadn't arrived yet. And when it did, she wasn't sure she'd have enough bullets. Why did silence feel louder than the bullets? The night had gone still again, broken only by ragged breathing and the faint metallic clatter of reloading. Smoke hung low, mingling with desert dust, curling like ghosts over the sandbags. She pulled her cheek away from the stock of her rifle, just enough to roll her neck, the vertebrae cracking quietly. Her shoulder throbbed where the recoil had buried itself, but she ignored it. Pain was temporary. Missing a target was. "Is it over?" Anders' voice cracked behind her, young and brittle. He was on his knees now, his blood-soaked sleeve tied off with a strip of cloth someone had ripped from their undershirt. His face looked pale in the moonlight, eyes wide like a child. She didn't answer, because she didn't know. Her scope swept the ridges again. The bodies lay still where they'd fallen, black silhouettes against darker earth. No movement, no advance, but she could feel it, the way the air trembled with things unseen. She knew enough about soldiers to recognize hesitation, not retreat. They were waiting. She dragged her tongue across dry lips. The taste of gunpowder lingered, sharp, bitter. She hated that taste. It clung to you, even when you tried to wash it out. Hey, Anders tried again, softer this time, as if he thought volume might protect him from the truth. You think they'll come back? Yes, she said finally, voice flat, low. He swallowed hard, looked down. The others shifted behind them, adjusting gear, shaking hands out, rubbing dirt from eyes that wouldn't stay open. They were alive, and they looked it, shocked into raw awareness, like people who had nearly drowned and were still coughing water from their lungs. One of them, Ortega, broke the silence with a nervous laugh, too sharp. Hell of a wake-up call, huh? No one answered. She slid back from her perch just far enough to murmur into the calm. Sector C-17, contact made, multiple hostiles down, no further movement. Static crackled. Then the commander's voice clipped, uninterested, acknowledged, hold position. That was it, no questions, no reinforcements, no concern. She stared at the radio a moment longer than she should have, fingers curling tight around it. Then she set it down, slow. She didn't tell the squad what she was thinking, that they weren't holding a sector, they were bait. A cough drew her eyes sideways. The medic, Ruiz, was kneeling beside Anders, checking the bandage. Ruiz's hands shook just barely. He was good at hiding fear, but she saw it anyway. She saw everything. You'll be fine, Ruiz muttered, not quite convincing himself. Just a graze, lucky. Anders nodded, eyes still fixed on her. Like if she said something, anything, it would matter more. She didn't. Because she remembered another young face, years ago, staring up at her for the same kind of reassurance. But that boy hadn't lived to hear the lie. She shifted back into her prone position, pulled the rifle close again. Her world narrowed to the circle of glass, the sweep of desert, the waiting, always waiting. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time bled differently when you measured it by breaths and heartbeats instead of clocks. The cold settled in, seeping under armor, biting at her fingers. She flexed them once, twice. Her gloves felt stiff, crusted with grit. And still her mind drifted, against her will. She thought of the photograph folded in her pocket. Worn edges, faded ink. She hadn't looked at it in months, maybe longer, but she knew every crease, every shadow on that paper. She carried it not for comfort, but as a weight, a reminder. She blinked hard, shoved the thought down. Not now. A whisper carried over the sand. She froze, listening. Not words, just the brush of fabric, the scrape of metal on stone. Too far for the others to hear, but not too far for her. Her scope tightened on a ridge. Movement again. Heads low, shadows melting forward, slower this time, testing her, testing the line. She steadied, breath shallow. The others hadn't noticed yet. Ortega leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. Ruiz was still fussing with the bandage. Anders just stared into nothing. She thought about waking them, thought about shouting, but instead she let her rifle answer. Crack! A figure dropped. The squad startled awake, curses flying, weapons clattering into hands. Contact! She didn't move, didn't speak. Just adjusted, found the next silhouette, fired. Another fell. The desert roared to life again. Gunfire shredded the silence, bullets whining against sandbags, dust exploding into their faces. The squad panicked, but less than before. They were learning. Fear had edges now, rough but sharper than ignorance. They huddled, shouted, fired. She stayed calm, always calm. But calm didn't mean empty. Each trigger squeeze pulled memories loose from the dark corners she kept them in. Her father's voice again. The farm. A wooden post they'd used as a target. How proud he'd been the day she split a can in half from 50 yards. Not many can do that. You've got a gift. She hated the word, gift. Like it was something she'd wanted, like it was something she could give back. The memory twisted, reshaped. Another face. A girl's this time. Laughing, hair caught in the wind, eyes bright. Not family, something different. Something she'd almost let herself keep. Almost. The crack of her rifle pulled her back. The girl's face dissolved into the desert. She fired again. Her squad cheered weakly at each target that fell. They were clinging to her accuracy, leaning on it like a crutch. She saw it in their eyes, the belief that as long as she kept hitting, they might live. It was a dangerous belief, because bullets run out, and people do too. The enemy fire slowed again, faltering. She waited, eyes sharp through the scope. The bodies lay heavier now, scattered like stones across the sand. The rest pulled back, disappearing into the night. Ortega let out a shaky laugh. "That's it, right, they're done." She didn't answer, because she knew they were. They were waiting again, just like her. She eased back, rolled her shoulders, whispered almost too quiet to hear, "This isn't the fight, not yet." And she hated herself for knowing it. The squad slumped into uneasy quiet. Ruiz lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, exhaling smoke that curled into the cold. Anders leaned his head back, eyes fluttering shut, blood drying on his sleeve. Ortega muttered prayers under his breath. Ordinary people, scared, flawed, human. And her apart from them, always apart. She adjusted her scope again, scanning. And she thought, what will they do if I'm gone? The question dug at her ribs, sharp, persistent, because she knew the answer. They would die. And maybe that was the point. She closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment. The sound of the desert filled her, wind hissing over sand, the faint creak of metal, the echo of her own heartbeat. She wondered if anyone, anywhere, would remember this night if they all vanished, or if the desert would swallow them whole, nameless, forgotten. She opened her eyes, and in the distance on the far ridge, a faint light flickered, a signal. Her chest tightened. This wasn't over, it was only beginning. And the secret she carried, why she was here, why she hadn't told them, burned heavier. Because that signal wasn't just for the enemy. It was for her. Why did that flicker of light feel like it was meant for her eyes alone? She kept her cheek pressed against the stock, breath locked in her throat, refusing to blink. On the ridge, the signal shimmered faint, deliberate. Once, twice. Pause again, not random, not chance. Her chest tightened. Her squad shifted uneasily, following her gaze but not understanding what they saw. To them it was nothing. To her it was language, a code she recognized but had no right to remember. She whispered inside her skull, "Not here, not now." Ortega leaned closer, muttering, "What is it?" Another muzzle flash. "Nothing," she said too quickly. Her voice was calm, but the words cut sharp. Ruiz squinted into the dark, looked like a light. "Mirage," she snapped. They quieted, uneasy. No one pressed her, they never did. She built that distance carefully, the wall between herself and them. They thought she preferred silence, that she was simply different, and maybe she was. But tonight, silence was armor. The light faded. The desert folded back into black. Still, it lingered behind her eyes, a signal meant for her, from people she thought she'd buried. She adjusted her scope, scanning, but the ridge was empty. Her pulse drummed in her ears, too fast, too loud. She forced herself to slow it, one breath at a time. "Not here, not now." Anders stirred, grimacing as Ruiz tightened the bandage around his arm. "Hurts like hell," he muttered. "Feels worse knowing we'll probably get more of it before sunrise." "You'll live," Ruiz said flat, the kind of tone that tried to sound reassuring but was really just tired. Ortega shook his head, exhaling hard. "If they hit us again, they'll come heavier. That first wave, that was a probe, and I don't like what that means." No one answered him, but they all knew he was right. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was waiting for the axe to fall. She stayed still, eyes scanning, her mind elsewhere. Her father had taught her to read signals long before the army had. The old man had been a radio operator in a war no one bothered to name anymore, and he'd passed the obsession to her. Patterns, codes, the art of messages hidden in plain sight. She used to love it, before she realized some codes weren't meant to be cracked. Before one had torn her apart. She clenched her jaw, pushed the thought down, not now. But the memory pressed anyway. The letter. The last words she'd never erased from her mind. A code slipped into plain text meant only for her. Words she'd never shared, not with her commander, not with her squad, not with anyone. She blinked hard, forced her scope to stay sharp. The desert whispered again, a scrape, a shuffle. She found the movement, two figures low against the ground, crawling forward. Careful, slow, testing the line again. She steadied, squeezed, fired. One dropped. The other froze, then darted backward, vanishing into the dark. Her squad jumped at the crack of her shot. Ortega muttered a curse, pressing tighter against the sandbags. Anders winced, clutching his bandaged arm tighter. Ruiz stubbed out his cigarette with trembling fingers. "Still out there," Ortega muttered. "Of course they're still out there," she said quietly. No one argued. The quiet settled again. The stars felt too close, the moon too sharp. Every sound was magnified, the click of safeties, the crunch of boots shifting, the hiss of breath against dry lips. She let her scope sweep again. Nothing now, just shadows. And in those shadows, her mind betrayed her. She remembered the girl, not from training, not from here, from before. Hair caught in sunlight, laughter breaking over her like waves. She'd been everything the desert wasn't, soft, alive, unafraid. And she'd been taken, too, not by bullets, not by war, by silence, by choices. Her choices. She had thought she'd buried that memory deep enough that the desert wouldn't dig it up. But here it was, breathing down her neck, tangled with the signal on the ridge. She pressed her eye harder to the scope, as if vision could drown out thought. But it didn't. Behind her, Ortega spoke again, voice rough. "You think command even cares if we make it through the night?" No one answered. He laughed bitterly, shook his head. "Didn't think so." Anders shifted, looking at her. "You care, right?" His voice was small, almost childlike. He wasn't asking her as a soldier. He was asking her as a person. She hesitated. "I care," she said finally. It was true, but not the whole truth. Because caring was why she was here. Caring too much for one thing, one person, had led her down this road. And now she carried it like a stone, heavy, unyielding. Another whisper of sound reached her. She froze, listening, not close, not yet, but it was there. She adjusted her scope. And for just a heartbeat, she thought she saw the flicker again. The signal, distant, patient, waiting. She exhaled slowly. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Her squad looked to her, not the horizon. Always to her. The silent belief in their eyes that she would hold the line, that she would keep them alive. She hated it, she needed it, both at once. Because she wasn't sure if she was here to save them, or to pay for what she'd already lost. Her cheek pressed harder to the stock, her breathing steadied. The desert waited. And so did she. But in the stillness, the truth gnawed louder. The signal on the ridge wasn't a threat. It was a summons. And she couldn't ignore it forever. Why did the night feel longer than a lifetime? She lay still, cheek pressed against her rifle, as the silence dragged on like a weight. Every second stretched, every breath scraped dry in her throat. The desert had become a clock without hands, ticking only in heartbeats. Behind her, the squad muttered in low voices. Exhaustion had loosened their tongues, chipped away at discipline. "I can't feel my damn fingers," Ortega whispered, rubbing them hard against his vest. "Cold cuts worse than bullets out here." "You'll live," Ruiz muttered, though his own teeth chattered between words. Anders sat slumped against the sandbags, eyelids heavy, head bobbing. He jerked awake each time, whispering curses to himself. His bandaged arm glistened dark with dried blood. He tried to hide the tremor in his hand, but it was there. She heard it all, every crack in their armor, every human weakness. And she hated how human they still were, because the desert didn't care. The enemy didn't care. Caring was how you died. Her scope swept the horizon again. Nothing moved. but her chest stayed tight, her nerves alive, because she knew what the others didn't. She'd seen the signal. She forced her mind to still, to focus on the landscape, the ridges, the dunes, the places a rifleman could hide, but her thoughts slid back anyway, to the flicker, the pattern, the way it had burned in her memory like handwriting only she could read. It was no accident. Someone out there knew her. Someone out there wanted her to see it. And the worst part, she knew what it meant. Ruiz's voice broke her thoughts. "You think they'll wait till dawn?" His tone was soft, too soft, like a child's question. She didn't look away from the scope. "They'll wait until we're weakest." Ortega cursed under his breath. "So, right about now." No one laughed. The silence after stretched too long. She felt their eyes on her, heavy, expectant. She hated that too. They thought she knew more than she did, that she had answers, that she was some kind of shield. If they only knew the truth. Anders broke it. His voice was hoarse but clear. "Why'd they send you here?" The question cut deeper than the desert wind. She didn't flinch outwardly, didn't move, but inside it twisted. "Because she's the best shot we've got," Ortega said quickly, as if covering for her, as if the obvious answer was enough. Anders didn't let it go. His tired eyes narrowed. "Yeah, but I've seen good shots before, and command doesn't waste people like her on outposts like this. They sent her here for a reason." The others glanced at her now, even Ruiz, curious, suspicious. Her mouth went dry. She kept her eyes in the scope, steady. "Reason simple," she said flat. "Line had to hold, I hold lines." They didn't argue, but they didn't believe it either, not fully. She didn't give them more, couldn't. Because how could she tell them the truth? That the light in the distance wasn't just the enemy. That it spoke to her, whispered like a ghost from her past. That someone out there knew her name, her history, her failure. The failure she had buried under silence. She breathed slow, pressed her cheek harder to the stock, let the scope be her escape. But the silence behind her was different now, heavier. They were watching her more closely than the desert. Her finger curled slightly against the trigger, not to fire, to remind herself of control. She needed control, always. A sound cut the night. Not bullets, not voices. A long, hollow whistle of wind rolling down the ridges, but it carried something with it. A rhythm, a pattern. Her chest clenched. She knew that pattern. 3 long, 2 short, pause, repeat. Her heart slammed once hard. She almost pulled away from the scope, almost showed it on her face, but she didn't. She kept still, kept calm. Because if the others knew what she was hearing, it would break them faster than any bullet. The whistle faded, the desert went quiet again. But inside her head the echo stayed. 3 long, 2 short. It was the same code she'd seen once before, years ago, on a day that had ended everything she thought she was. She shut her eyes, for a second, just a second, and the memory broke through. A rooftop, smoke, the smell of burning rubber. A signal flashed from across the street, the same code, 3 long, 2 short. And she had recognized it then too, too late. She'd fired, hit the wrong target, and when the dust cleared, the body on the ground wasn't an enemy. It was her. The girl, the one she had let herself love, the one she had promised to protect. Gone. Because she had read the code and acted on it. Because she had believed in a pattern that was never meant for her. Her hands shook just once. She forced them still. "Not here, not now." Behind her, Ortega muttered again, restless. "I don't like this. It's too quiet. Feels like they're waiting on something." "They are," she whispered. "What?" he asked. She didn't answer. Because the truth was too sharp. They weren't waiting on something. They were waiting on her. She kept her eye on the scope, jaw tight, heart steadying into something harder. If the code was meant for her again, she had a choice. Ignore it, keep her squad alive as long as she could, or follow it and walk into the same trap she'd walked into before. Her finger tapped lightly against the trigger guard, slow, deliberate, a rhythm no one else would notice. 3 long, 2 short. Her chest felt heavy, because the desert wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It was a reckoning. And somewhere out there, in the dark, someone who knew her past was calling her name without speaking it. The first shot cracked the horizon apart. It was small, distant, but sharp enough to slice through every whispered breath, every drifting thought. The squad froze, rifles lifted. The silence after was heavy, waiting. Then the second shot came, closer. A puff of sand spat just inches from Ortega's boot. He swore, ducking low behind the barrier. "They've started," Ruiz hissed. His rifle already tracked the dark line of ridges. Eyes up. Her heart stayed steady. She had been waiting for this. The desert had been holding its breath, and now it exhaled bullets. Through her scope she caught the faint shimmer of movement. A figure shifting across the ridge. She squeezed. The shot was clean, silent, final. The figure dropped. But for everyone she marked, 2 more emerged. Shadows breaking from shadows, rifles glinting under the thin moonlight. Contact left. Multiple, Anders started, then cut himself off with a grunt of pain. His wounded arm had split open again, blood soaking through the bandage. Still, he lifted his rifle with his good hand, firing short bursts into the dark. The air cracked alive. Muzzle flashes lit the ridges like lightning. Bullets hissed and snapped over their heads, churning sand, punching holes into their cover. "Keep your heads down," Ortega shouted, already losing rounds in controlled bursts. His voice cracked with a mix of fear and fury. She didn't shout, didn't waste breath. Her scope was her world. Her trigger was language enough. She drew lines through the night, cutting shadows down one by one. But the enemy didn't rush. They probed, tested. Their shots came in waves, sharp and deliberate, like hands pushing against a wall to see how much weight it would take to topple it. "They're sizing us up," she muttered. Ruiz, crouched low, barked back. "Then let's make them regret it." The night burned alive for minutes that felt like hours. Brass clinked hot against the sand. The squad shouted, cursed, fired. And still the enemy pressed. Not enough to overwhelm, just enough to bleed them thin. A sharp cry split the air. Ortega fell back hard, clutching his leg. Blood welled through his fingers, dark in the pale light. "Medic," he gasped, though there was none. Ruiz dragged him lower behind the barrier, ripping cloth to bind the wound. "Stay with me. You're not going anywhere, you hear me." She wanted to look, wanted to help, but her scope held her captive, because in the chaos she saw it again. The flicker. Not a muzzle flash, not fire. A light on the ridge, pulsing faint, deliberate. 3 long, 2 short. Her throat tightened. She forced her shot anyway, dropping another silhouette, but her eye kept drifting back, to that light. It shouldn't be there, not in the middle of a firefight, unless it was meant for her. Unless it was always meant for her. A hand grabbed her shoulder hard. She snapped her aim away, pistol half drawn before she saw Ruiz's face. His eyes blazed. "What the hell are you looking at?" Her jaw locked. "Enemy, ridge line." "Don't lie to me," he snarled. The battlefield roared around them, but his voice cut clear. "You keep staring at something else. What is it?" She didn't answer, couldn't. His grip tightened, shaking her once. "You hiding something." A bullet whined past, punching the sand between them. Ruiz flinched, swore, ducked. "Damn it, cover left flank." He broke off to fire, leaving her crouched low, heart hammering harder than the rifle's recoil. The others had heard. She felt it in the way Anders glanced at her, suspicion sharp even through the haze of blood loss. In the way Ortega, pale and sweating, kept his eyes half on her instead of the ridge. They didn't trust her, not anymore. And maybe they shouldn't. Because the code still pulsed in her head, hot and insistent. 3 long, 2 short. She shut her eyes just once as the night screamed around her. The memory stabbed through again, The rooftop, the girl, the mistake. The way the code had led her hand, had guided her bullet into the wrong body. She should ignore it. She should lock it down, bury it deeper than the desert could dig. But what if she did? What if this time it meant something different? What if this time, following it could end the war, end the blood, end the endless nights? Another burst of fire raked across the barrier, splintering sandbags, kicking dirt into her teeth. She dropped low, spitting grit, heart caught between beats. The desert stormed on. Minutes blurred into a brutal rhythm: fire, duck, reload, fire again. Every shot she placed was perfect, every kill clean, but still the weight pressed harder. Ortega groaned low, bleeding out slow. Anders swayed, barely upright, firing more on stubbornness than strength. Ruiz shouted hoarse commands, voice cracking under strain. They were breaking. And through it all the signal still pulsed. 3 long, 2 short. Her hands were steady, her aim unshakable, but inside the war was tearing louder than the firefight itself. Because she knew the enemy wasn't just attacking, they were calling. And the call was meant for her. What breaks first in a firefight isn't the rifle, it isn't the wall of sandbags. It's trust. By dawn, the desert was quiet again. Smoke drifted over the ridges where bodies lay hidden by shadow. The air stank of spent brass and dried blood. The squad hadn't spoken in hours. Ortega lay pale and trembling, breath shallow, Ruiz's makeshift bandage soaked through twice over. Anders sat propped against the barrier, eyes half closed, his rifle across his lap like an anchor he refused to drop. Ruiz paced slow, boots crunching gravel, jaw tight enough to crack. She stayed on her scope, but her eyes blurred. The signal was gone. No more flicker, no more pulsing code, just the silence of men waiting for something they didn't want to admit. "All right," Ruiz said at last, his voice scraped low. "We need to talk." No one moved. The desert wind carried only the rustle of sand. He stopped packing, turned to face her. His gaze burned. "You've been hiding something since the first night. Don't bother denying it. I've seen where you look, when you freeze, when your head's somewhere else." Her breath caught, but she kept her rifle steady. Anders cracked one eye open, voice dry, broken. "She's been off since the drop. Not just nerves, something else." Ortega coughed, blood-flecked, but still forced the words. "She sees things. That's what I've noticed. She's watching something none of us see." The silence after was worse than bullets. She finally lowered her rifle slow. "You think I'd betray you," she said. Not a question, just air turned to stone. Ruiz's hands flexed on his rifle. "I think you know something you're not telling us, and men died last night because of it." Her heart stuttered. He didn't know the half of it. She should speak. She should tell them about the code, about the rooftop, about the girl who should have lived. But if she did... Her throat closed. She wasn't ready, not yet. "I don't owe you answers," she whispered. Ruiz stepped closer, his shadow cutting across her. "We're out here alone, supplies dwindling, medics gone, and you don't owe us answers." His jaw clenched. "We live or die on trust. You think that scope makes you a god out here. That steady hand doesn't mean a thing if we can't trust the eyes behind it." She didn't flinch, couldn't. The desert didn't forgive flinching. But inside, God inside, the words cut. She thought of the girl again, the soft gasp when the bullet hit, the way her body folded like it had been waiting for it. She blinked hard, jaw tight. "You don't want the truth." "Try me," Ruiz shot back. Anders stirred, his voice hoarse. "If she's hiding intel and it gets us killed..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Her finger twitched on the trigger, useless against allies. She forced her rifle down, the sand crunching beneath it. Then the horizon cracked again. Not shots this time, mortars. The first blast punched the air, sending a wave of sand and smoke rolling over them. Ortega screamed as shards tore through the air. Ruiz dropped low, dragging him deeper into cover. Another blast closer. The ridge bloomed with fire. Positions, Ruiz barked, voice raw with command. Now they're coming again. No more time. The desert swallowed questions whole. She lifted her rifle, breath shallow but steady. Through her scope, she saw them, dozens this time, breaking from the ridge in waves. Not probing, not testing, charging. The full storm. Her finger found rhythm, shot after shot stitching the horizon. Bodies fell, dust kicked, still they came. Ruiz fired beside her, shouting through the chaos. Anders' right flank, keep that barrel hot. Anders obeyed, teeth clenched against pain. His shots were wild but furious, each burst pushing the line a little further back. Ortega tried to lift his rifle, hands shaking too much. She heard him choke, don't let them break us. The enemy didn't slow. Fire chewed the sandbags, shattering wood, spraying dirt. Through the scope her breath hitched. The signal again. On the far ridge, pooling between muzzle flashes, 3 long, 2 short. Even now, even in the middle of death. She froze, her finger hovered, useless. Take the shot, Ruiz roared, slamming into her shoulder. What are you waiting for? She fired, but not at the signal. At the wave just left of it, 2 figures dropped, still they advanced. Her pulse thundered, her mind screamed. 3 long, 2 short. It wasn't random, it wasn't chaos, it was directed. It was a hand reaching through smoke and fire, clutching her throat. Ruiz saw it, saw her hesitate. His rage burned hotter than the muzzle flash. You're going to get us killed, he spat. Whatever that is, whatever you're hiding, it's killing us. She turned her rifle again, jaw locked so hard it hurt. She shot until her shoulder ached, until brass clinked hot around her knees. But the words dug deeper than bullets. Because maybe he was right. Maybe her silence was killing them. The desert roared louder, mortars landing closer. One smashed the far wall, sandbags erupting into the sky. Anders went down hard, screaming as shrapnel tore his side. His rifle clattered useless into the dust. She slid to him, dragging his body lower behind cover. His blood slicked her gloves. His eyes fluttered, panic sharp in them. Don't let me die. Her chest cracked inside. She pressed the wound, hard, hands steady but soul breaking. Over the ridge, another signal flare cut the sky. Not theirs, the enemy. Green light, the sign of encirclement. They were being closed in. Ruiz swore, spitting fury into the night. They're going to box us, choke us out, damn it. Her eyes burned, not from sand, not from smoke, from the truth pressing up her throat. She couldn't hold it anymore. The girl's face, the rooftop, the shot that had never left her. The code that haunted every silence. It was all tied, and if she didn't tell them now, they'd all be buried here, nameless in the sand. She drew breath, sharp, trembling. The words scraped raw. I know what the signal means. Ruiz's head snapped to her, fury sharpened into something colder. What did you say? Her chest heaved once, then again. The code, 3 long, 2 short, I've seen it before. Her voice cracked. I was the one who pulled the trigger that night, the rooftop, the wrong target, a girl died because of it, and this, she swallowed hard, shaking. This is the same code, they're using it for me. The silence between shots was worse than the mortars. Ruiz's stare cut her open. Anders groaned, half-conscious. Ortega panted, bleeding out. You're telling me, Ruiz said slowly, that the enemy is signaling you, that they've been signaling you all along. Her throat locked, yes. His face twisted, not just with anger but something heavier, betrayal. Then we're already dead, he whispered. The desert thundered again, but inside her, the silence was louder. The barrel of Ruiz's rifle hovered just inches from her face. His hands were steady, his eyes were not. They flicked between rage, disbelief, and something she couldn't name, something rawer. Say it again, he rasped. She didn't blink. The code is for me. Behind him, Anders groaned, coughing blood. Ortega whimpered low, fatting. The desert thundered, mortars walking closer. The walls of sandbags bled sand like hourglasses tipped on their sides. "Why would they signal you?" Ruiz spat. His voice cracked sharp, but his finger hadn't tightened on the trigger. "Not yet. Why would the enemy?" "Because I killed the wrong one," she cut him, her voice trembling but louder now. She couldn't hide anymore. "Because I took the shot. The rooftop. The girl wasn't the target, Ruiz. She wasn't supposed to die, but I pulled the trigger anyway." The memory slammed her again. That quiet gasp. The way her body folded against the wall like it had been waiting for death. Her throat burned. They've been using it ever since. The code, the reminder, 3 long, 2 short. It's her death echoing back at me. Silent, even the desert seemed to listen. Ruiz's eyes flickered. Confusion cracked his rage, but only for a moment. Then he snarled, pushing the barrel harder into her forehead. "You expect me to believe the enemy is wasting rounds, wasting men, just to what? Taunt you. A single sniper." Her breath shuddered. "Not just taunt, direct. That signal, it isn't random. They're guiding their moves with it, and if I can read it," she swallowed. "If I can read it, maybe I can stop them." Anders rasped from behind the barrier, his voice little more than a whisper. "Do it. If she knows, let her try." Ruiz's head snapped toward him. "She's the reason we're here dying." "No," Anders coughed blood. "She's the reason we're not dead already. Half of them dropped before they reached the wall because of her. You want a chance. Let her try." The weight hung heavy. Ruiz's breath shook once. Then he lowered the rifle, but his eyes stayed locked, burning. "One wrong word," he said. "One sign this is a setup." "I know," she whispered. Another mortar slammed nearby, shoving dust into their lungs, rattling broken boards. She lifted her scope again, searching the ridges. Her pulse quickened as the signal flared once more, 3 long, 2 short. But this time it shifted, a pause, then 1 short. Her gut twisted, not just a memory anymore, a message evolving. She scribbled in the dirt with the edge of her knife, carving lines and dots, her hands moving faster than her thoughts. The rooftop came back, the briefings, the intercepted code, the night she'd thought she understood. She hadn't. 3 long, 2 short, pause, 1 short, she muttered. "That's movement. Encirclement. They're closing the ring to the east." Ruiz leaned low over her shoulder, suspicion sharp in his stare. "You're guessing." She shook her head, breath harsh. "I know this, it's old tradecraft. They're telling their units where to press." Ruiz glanced at Ortega, pale and bleeding, at Anders slipping further into shock, then back at her. His voice cracked with exhaustion and fury. "Then tell me where to shoot." Her chest tightened, because if she was wrong. She set her jaw, forcing the rooftop from her mind. Not the girl, not her face, just the code, just the lines in the dirt. "East Ridge," she whispered. "They're closing there. If we don't break it now, we're done." Ruiz's hesitation was a knife edge. Then he moved, shouting into the chaos. "Shift east. Anders left, cover fire." Anders tried. His body screamed with every shot, but the bursts rang out, stuttering through the smoke. She aligned her scope east, breath steady, hand unshakable. The figures were there, moving low, tight, exactly where the code had promised. Her finger pulled clean. One dropped. Another. Ruiz followed, his rifle barking in sharp rhythm. The enemy faltered, surprised, pinned before their circle could close. For the first time, the tide bent. But the silence in her chest didn't lift. Because the code wasn't done. Another flash, different this time, 2 short, 2 long. Her skin prickled cold. "What does it mean?" Ruiz barked, reloading with hands that shook. Her lips pressed tight, 2 short, 2 long. She remembered it from before, not in training, not in intel briefings, from that night. "The rooftop." Her throat locked. "It's not for you," she whispered. Ruiz seized her shoulder, shaking hard. "What does it mean?" Her eyes stung. "It means me." The world blurred. The girl's face again, the eyes wide caught in her scope, the gasp, the fold, the end. She shook her head hard, snapping back to the desert, to the fire, to Ruiz's hands digging into her. "If you're lying," he started. "I'm not," she cut him, fierce now. The fury was hers this time. "This whole assault, this whole desert, it's not just war, it's punishment. They're not here to take ground, they're here to drag me out." Ruiz's grip faltered. He looked at her like she was already dead. Anders groaned again, slipping further away. Ortega whispered delirium, calling for home. The code pulsed once more, too short, too long. She clenched her jaw, the choice burned inside. If she led them with the signal, maybe they'd survive the night, or maybe she'd walk them straight into the trap meant for her. Her voice cracked, but she forced it out. "I can keep us alive, but you have to let me guide us." Ruiz's stare drilled into her. For a long moment the desert seemed to vanish, nothing but his eyes pinning hers. Then he spat into the dust, jaw clenched. "You get us through this," he growled, "or I put you down myself." She nodded once, slow, fair. Her scope lifted again. The code pulsed in the dark, dragging her deeper into its rhythm. 3 long, too short, pause, 1 short, too long. She read it like a confession, like a sentence written for her alone. And for the first time she didn't just watch, she answered. Her shots fell into the code's rhythm, each kill an echo, each pause a reply. The desert became a dialogue written in blood. And somewhere on the far ridge, whoever was signaling her answered back. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? The night had ended. The enemy was broken. But the quiet that followed carried its own weight, a suffocating, invisible pressure that pressed against her chest, more unbearable than the recoil of her rifle. She was still there, lying in the dirt on the ridge she had turned into a wall no enemy could pass. The weapon cooled against her cheek, metal smelling faintly of smoke and oil. Below, the valley that had burned with tracer fire only hours ago now seemed frozen, like a battlefield painted in ash. She could hear them, her unit, the survivors. Their voices were small, drifting up from the ruins of the compound, relief mixed with disbelief. They had held. They were alive. And yet she did not rise, not yet. Her eyes stayed fixed on the scope, as if she feared the act of standing might undo everything, might invite the enemy back. But deep down, she knew it wasn't fear that anchored her to the ground. It was exhaustion, bone-deep, soul-heavy exhaustion. Because for hours she had been more than a sniper, more than a soldier. She had been the line itself. The men she had dropped one by one, their shadows clung to her. She could still see the twitch of fingers, the stagger before collapse, the silence that followed each pull of her trigger. She told herself they had chosen to advance, that they had forced her hand. But another voice whispered cruelly, "And who are you now, except the woman who decided who lived and who fell?" Her hands trembled against the stock. She hated that they did. She let out a breath. It fogged against the glass of her scope before vanishing into the night. Then at last she lifted her head. The world looked different without the crosshairs. Down below, Captain Riznik was moving through the compound, checking bodies, counting his people. His limp was more pronounced now, but he forced his posture straight, a leader who needed his men to believe he was unbreakable. "Sniper," his voice cracked the quiet, finding her in the shadows above. "Line's clear, come down, it's over." She almost laughed, over. She rolled onto her back, staring at the sky instead. Dawn was bleeding into the edges of the horizon, the faintest thread of light staining black clouds with pale gray. She had seen many sunrises through a scope. This one felt different, like a question she wasn't ready to answer. Because what was left for her after the line was drawn? She walked into the compound on unsteady legs. Dirt clung to her face, streaked by sweat. Nobody spoke at first. They just looked at her, the soldier who had held the ridge alone, who had turned numbers and odds into a meaningless calculation. Then Corporal Diaz muttered, "Hell of a night," voice raw, half broken. Others echoed it in small ways: nods, a pat on her shoulder, a glance that carried gratitude too heavy for words. They didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Soldiers understood silence better than anyone. She gave a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze caught on a body bag being zipped at the edge of the yard. Her chest tightened. Not all had survived. Private Henley, barely 20. She remembered his stories of fishing with his grandfather, the way he had once admitted in a whisper that he was afraid of dying nameless without anyone remembering who he was. Now his name would be etched on a plaque, his face faded in a photo, another folded flag to break another family. She closed her eyes, swallowing the bitterness that rose. Was that the price, one she had failed to stop? Resnick limped over, his face a map of fatigue. "You did good," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes, those betrayed something deeper. He had seen her work. He knew what it cost. She shook her head. "Not good, just necessary." For a moment neither spoke. Only the wind moved between them, rattling broken shutters, lifting dust into lazy swirls. Finally he said softly, "Sometimes that's all war lets us be." They secured the compound, called for evac. Hours blurred together. The radio hissed with static and broken messages. Medevac birds came first, carrying away the wounded. Then supply drops, then reinforcements too late for the fight that had already ended. Through it all she kept moving, counting ammo, helping bandage wounds, carrying bodies. Not because anyone ordered her to, but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. When she finally collapsed onto a cracked bench by the courtyard wall, her hands were red. She wasn't sure if it was blood, oil, or both. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and for the first time allowed herself to feel it, everything she had pushed away. The loneliness on that ridge, the fear before every squeeze of the trigger, the crushing knowledge that it could have ended differently. And beneath it all, a quieter memory. Her brother, the one who never came home, the folded flag handed to her mother, the silence that followed in their house, as if walls themselves had decided to mourn. That was why she had joined, why she had picked up the rifle. She had promised herself that no family, no unit, would be left undefended if she had the strength to stand. Last night she had kept that promise. So why did it still feel like she was carrying a weight too heavy to bear? When the evac convoy arrived, the compound was already fading into ghosthood. Fires burned low. Sand covered blood. The valley seemed determined to erase the night as quickly as it had painted it. She climbed into the vehicle last. Her rifle leaned against her shoulder, but it felt heavier than ever. As the convoy rumbled away, she looked back one final time. The ridge loomed above, still scarred with spent casings. To anyone else, it was just a hill. To her, it was a line drawn in fire and memory. A place where she had learned what it meant to stand alone. A place she would carry forever. They reached the forward base by dusk. Doctors rushed the wounded inside. Officers demanded reports. Radios buzzed with questions. Through the chaos, she moved like a shadow, answering what needed to be answered, ignoring the rest. At last she found herself at the edge of the base, leaning against the fence, watching the sun sink behind distant mountains. The sky burned orange, then bled into crimson, then faded into violet. The colors reminded her of the rifle's muzzle flash, of the night that had changed her. And for the first time she let the tears come, quiet, unannounced, slipping down her dirt-streaked cheeks. Not for herself, but for Henley, for the brother she had lost, for every name that would never be spoken again except in remembrance. A voice broke the silence. "You held the line." She turned. Resnick stood beside her, cigarette in hand, smoke curling into the evening air. He wasn't asking. He was telling her like a fact carved into stone. She didn't reply. Instead, she let her eyes return to the horizon, to the fading light, to the quiet truth she had learned in the dirt and darkness. That courage was not loud. It did not demand to be seen. It was often invisible, carried in silence, paid in scars. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She drew a slow breath, steadying herself. The night behind her, the road ahead uncertain. But one truth remained. No matter how heavy the weight, she would keep standing. Because someone always had to. The sun vanished, darkness fell. And she did not look away.